Hello, listeners. Welcome to the first ever episode of Where There's a Weeb, There's a Way. And today we're going to be venturing into the Shinigami realm with an episode all about Death Note.
We're your hosts, Chris and Grace. And Where There's a Weeb, There's a Way is a podcast in which I introduce my fiancée, Grace, to the world of anime. She has some experience of the medium, but is a little bit limited, I guess. Experience Studio Ghibli movies and a couple series, but never to the point of like wanting to do like more of like a deeper dive into the world of anime. So each episode we will be talking about a series which I consider to be seminal to the medium of anime, whether it's for cultural, historical, or artistic significance. Getting the take of myself, who is a very experienced anime viewer. I've been watching anime for way too many years than I want to admit. I've been getting the take of someone who is more relatively new to the experience and what they think of the show or the movie that we're discussing.
Yes, so you have been watching anime since you were a teenager, is that right?
Well, I want to go even further back.
Okay.
I want to go even further back and say I've been watching anime since I was probably about 9, I want to say. So me and Grace are old. We're children born in the early 90s. So I grew up surrounding the Pokemon craze of the mid to late 90s, when Pokemon was first introduced into the West by Nintendo. So Pokemon rather geniusly hit the market from 3 different points of attack: trading cards, anime, and video games. All things that kids still love today. But Pokemon kind of hit me hard in the late 90s. Me and all my friends became addicted to it. And kind of from there, what I ended up seeking was I was even aware that Pokemon was anime, and I probably knew it was Japanese, and why it was like a bit different to kind of the Western cartoons I kind of grew up watching. But there was something like distinctly different about Pokemon, and like an aesthetic and an art style that I really enjoyed. And then as the success of Pokemon kind of rumbled on, they obviously started to import more stuff to the West from Japan. So eventually, I started to watch the dubs of Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, Shaman King, stuff like that, where they were kind of riding off the success of Pokemon. And I would watch it purely on the basis that it was a Japanese cartoon. And from there, I kind of grew then into kind of watching lots of kind of the big classics and reading a lot of the big classics of Shonen Jump. So stuff like One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, which would then kind of be supplemented by watching lots of like anime movies. So stuff like Akira, the Studio Ghibli movies in particular, and kind of lots of others. And then kind of from there, then my fandom kind of continued throughout high school. And then it's kind of waxed and waned a little bit since high school. I used to have a bit of a complicated relationship with anime, which I'm kind of getting over now. I'm able to enjoy anime for kind of just pretty much what it is. So with that, I kind of have a lot of experience with the medium and just kind of like Japanese entertainment in general. Outside of being a fan of anime, I also enjoy playing lots of like Japanese video games. So stuff like your role playing games like Persona, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest. So the aesthetic and kind of the world of Japanese media is sort of I'm heavily into films as well, in particular like Akira Kurosawa and Takashi Miike and all that sort of stuff. While you, on the other hand, a little bit more limited.
I definitely would say I'm more limited, yes. I I did also watch Pokemon a little bit when I was a child. I did not know it was Japanese. I just thought it was a cartoon. And obviously I've seen Studio Ghibli movies, plenty of those, which I have enjoyed. Especially like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. But I've never really thought of those as anime in the sense that like of shonen anime. So I was never really that bothered about it. But then I did hear very recently, about a couple of months ago, about this one show called The Promised Neverland that's quite popular now. And I heard about the premise of this show and I thought that sounds so weird and dark but interesting. So I I went to Chris, I went to you and I said, you're going to laugh at me, but there's an anime I'd really like to watch. And we watched the first season of that. It was, we'll do an episode about that at some point, I think. So having watched that, I was really interested in what else there is in terms of anime that's good. So we kind of have taken it from there.
Yeah. So like, I was super excited because like there's loads of shows that like I've not watched or shows that I've wanted to rewatch, and kind of with the way we kind of structure our lives, you know, like our watching time, we do stuff together. It's quite rare that we'll kind of go off and like watch our own individual shows, and if it is, it's on a very, very kind of casual basis. So yeah, it was quite exciting, and like anime, like the viewing that I have been doing was almost like a bit like a dirty secret, I guess. You know, like I'd kind of watch it, yeah, like either on my phone going to work or stuff, or like when I had a bit of downtime when, you know, Grace wasn't using the TV or something. So for me, it's been great just to kind of get back into it and revisit a lot of shows which I've, you know, really enjoyed, or watching the anime adaptations for the first time, because for me, I always kind of viewed myself as kind of being like a manga reader first before like being an anime viewer. So the easiest way for a teenager in the UK in the mid-2000s was to buy manga. That was more readily available than like anime. Anime, you had to go to illicit sites and download it and potentially corrupt your parents' PC and all this sort of stuff. So manga was definitely easier. So for me as well, like it's the first time kind of watching a lot of like anime adaptations of stuff, which is definitely the case of the subject episode for today, which I guess we'll get onto.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Death Note today.
So okay, so my first question is, before we kind of get into it, what have you heard about Death Note before I suggested it as the first one?
Well, I did know that it was about a person who finds a book, and if you write somebody's name in the book, they die.
And that was it.
That was all I knew.
Didn't know anything else.
Yeah, I'd obviously, you have some of the manga, so I suppose I'd seen the covers, but I didn't really know much more than that.
Okay. Well, for me, like, you know, Death Note, I selected it as the first one to watch after The Promised Neverland because, one, it's an incredibly popular series. Anyone who is into anime will have either experienced Death Note or read Death Note at some point, or at least got like a kind of basic idea of what Death Note is about. And my experience of it was being there pretty much when the series was getting massively popular, especially in the West. You know, I remember going to what used to be Borders, which I guess is like a Barnes and Noble equivalent for our US listeners. It used to be a bookshop chain in the UK, and they used to stock manga. And you had all the usual stuff, like, you know, your Dragon Ball Zs, your Narutos, your One Piece. But then it kind of, with the Black Spine, Death Note caught my eye instantly. Being a kind of gloomy, doomy emo kid in the mid-2000s, you pick up the first volume of Death Note, which is the iconic cover of Light in his, school gear, wearing a scythe, not wearing a scythe, wielding a scythe, with a demon in the background of a purple cross and a black cover. It felt very emo, it felt very gothic, so I, of course, had to buy it. And what I found was a series which was very different to Naruto, where the battles in Death Note are not battles which are kind of fought between, two magical ninjas, but between intellects. The battle of trying to outwit one another was something that was hugely appealing to me, and I think a lot of people kind of really got into kind of Death Note. I think for that reason, and I think it also there's something about Death Note as well where I think it taps into that thing of being a teenager, which the series eventually does lose, and we'll get onto that when I think it loses a lot of the heart. But that whole idea of being a teenager and your bedroom is your space and it's a space for you to express yourself and to hide secrets. Teenagers will always hide things from the parents that they don't want them to see. It could be a porn magazine, it could be a diary that you don't want anyone to see. But I'd argue that most teenagers will hide something in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And I think Death Note absolutely taps into that, especially in the first half of the series where Light's a school, the protagonist is a pupil at a school, and he's got this great secret. So kind of for the intellectual back and forth and the kind of mental gymnastics, I thought this would be a great one to watch post Promised Neverland, because the Promised Neverland really, really did remind me of Death Note quite a lot. So I thought that would be a fantastic one to go and watch as like a kind of first one in this canon that I'm introducing Grace to.
Just a note, we are going to aim to keep the first half of this discussion as spoiler-free as possible, and we will talk about spoilers at the end, but we'll warn you when that is about to happen, so that if you want to stop listening and go and watch Death Note if you've not seen it yet, then you can.
Yeah, so the idea of the conversation is basically to kind of get it from the perspective of someone who's a bit more experienced with the medium, knows, a lot of the more kind of where it's placed within the oeuvre of where it stands, as I said, in the medium of anime and manga. And then getting the perspective of someone who is completely new, well, not completely new, but still kind of getting adjusted to it, and discussing why it should be considered to be part of the canon, I guess. Why it's an important piece to watch. So little facts about Death Note, if anyone is not aware. So Death Note is a psychological, supernatural mystery thriller that was initially published between 2003 and 2006 in the annals of Weekly Shonen Jump magazine, and this will not be the last time you'll hear the name Shonen Jump, because it's going to come up probably quite a lot, especially we talk about the canon of classic anime and manga. The manga was written by Tsugumi Oba and illustrated by Takeshi Obata, in a slightly unusual move for shonen manga where the artist and the writer are the same. This duo will often do kind of delegate the two tasks. So before Death Note, their most popular series was Hikaru no Go, which is a manga about a guy who plays Go and is possessed by a spirit who's really good at playing Go. I've never watched or read Hikaru no Go. I've heard it's good, so maybe I'll check it out one day. But Death Note, when it kind of came out, kind of became a bit of a overnight sensation, a bit of a midnight success. The highly detailed art style and the intricate plotting of all these machinations between the different characters and the mystery plot, kind of stood in contrast to the slightly brighter world of kind of what was going on in Shonen at the time, with the kind of high sea adventures of Luffy and the pirates and Naruto, which I'm pretty sure when this came out, Naruto was still in the first half, so Naruto was still a kid. So kind of in contrast to Shonen Jump, which was kind of born out of the wake of the success of Dragon Ball Z, Death Note stood out like a sore thumb, and I'd probably say a huge part of its success is kind of because of that. So Death Note has been adapted several times. The most famous one and the subject of today's episode is, of course, the anime, which began airing in 2006 with 37 episodes, produced by Madhouse. And then there are also several live-action movies made in Japan of varying degrees of quality. They did like a 2-part adaptation of like the series, and then they did like a couple L spin-off movies. And then rather infamously, Netflix, seeing the success of anime on their streaming service, decided to help fund a Western adaptation of Death Note, which we have not seen. And maybe we could do a side episodes talking about Western adaptations of anime with William Dafoe as Ryuk. And yeah, I've not heard good things, and maybe we'll talk about it eventually. So yeah, so Death Note's got a huge amount of, I think, crossover appeal to someone who's new to anime, which is why I posit it as being a good introductory series, someone just getting into it. Would you agree, Grace?
I would. I think it's accessible. It's not too weird, and it's definitely to begin with. I think it's a very compelling narrative.
Oh yeah. So I mean, do you want to just kind of summarise what the show's about, like just a brief overview, the setup?
It's about a high school student called Light Yagami, who is the son of a police chief. He finds this notebook that has Death Note written on the front, and inside there are a list of instructions, really. They explain how to use this notebook to kill people. Light decides that he will use it to kill people he thinks deserve to die. So that would be criminals, murderers. He truly believes he can make the world a better place by wiping out those sorts of people. Obviously, after he does this for a while, it becomes apparent that there is a serial killer on the loose, and Light's dad, the chief of the police, launches an investigation into this, and the police can't really get a handle on it, so they hire a mysterious detective who is known only as L to track down and find the identity of the killer. And it becomes a battle of wits between Light and L. Oh, and the notebook is probably important to mention. It belongs to a Shinigami, who you could probably explain the concept of Shinigami a bit better than I can.
Yeah. So like Shinigami are it's basically Japanese for death gods. So the Shinigami in the world of Death Note kind of oversee the running of things involving deaths, but they've gone lazy. The Shinigami are lazy, and Ryuk just accidentally drops his notebook into the human world just to see what fun he can have, basically. So it's by happenstance and accident that the Death Note ends up in the world and is picked up by Light, who, yeah, as Grace said, through his killings, the wider community start to recognise this as perhaps the work of a serial killer, which is then romanticised into Kira, which kind of is like a bit of a Japanese take on saying killer, but it becomes Kira. So basically, yeah, the battle becomes between who can outwit one another first, Kira or L. The prize being either a perfect world as Light envisions it, or a world where L is able to bring Light to justice.
Mm-hmm. So, with that out the way, should we talk about some of the characters in Death Note?
Yeah, of course. Because I've got a lot to say about the characters of Death Note.
Same, actually.
Yeah, quite a bit. Obviously, you've got your protagonist Light, who is again, Light is an atypical shonen protagonist. I wouldn't even call him the protagonist.
He's awful.
Yeah, everyone hates Light.
I hate him.
Yeah. So, was there like any point where you were rooting for Light?
The only point where not really. There is one scene in the first episode where he uses the Death Note to kill a would-be rapist that he witnesses, and that is the only point where I was kind of like, I can't pretend that I wouldn't do the same. Or I'd like to think I wouldn't, but I could kind of sympathise with that. But very, very, very quickly, I really, really started to hate this kid. And in fact, what kept me watching was wanting to see him brought down and humiliated.
Yeah, we'll get into it when we get into the spoiler section, which I feel like will be the longer part of it. But yeah, no, it's interesting because it's weird having a series where you don't root for your main character, and I think it's a little bit different to like I think Light stands as the granddaddy of the toxic male protagonist.
Definitely. You could talk a lot about how terrible Walter White is or Tony Soprano, but I think Light Yagami is a lot worse than them both.
Yeah, definitely, because like with Walter White, you understand his motive for doing things, and it becomes warped by his own ego. While with Tony Soprano, he is reacting to like a world that he's always known, and he thinks this is the way that things should be. It is.
I think they both have some redeeming qualities.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Light has none.
Yeah. Light's got no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Like I know if my choice between having like going out for dinner with either Tony Soprano or Light Yagami, I absolutely would go for Tony Soprano.
Definitely.
I feel like I would at least have a good time with Tony.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't do anything too...
doesn't say anything too racist or anything. Then it would probably be okay.
You'd probably have an okay time. He'd probably take you for some nice Italian food, while Light would probably just not turn up.
Yeah.
He'd just look down on you. Which, as I said, is interesting that, you've got a protagonist who is so unlikable. It's very unusual, which I think kind of ultimately makes Death Note a bit dry. I think we'll kind of talk about it a bit more when we kind of get into kind of the spoilers and we talk about more arcs specifically, but I think Death Note's problem is that it has a core which really starts to come out towards the end of like the first half of the series, and then it undoes a lot of that in the second half, which we'll get into when we discuss the second half of the series in the spoiler section.
Yeah. So the next character we should probably talk about is L.
Yes. Now, by contrast, I think most people really like L.
I like L.
Yeah, I think L's L's that kind of classic, quirky, like sees things kind of outside the box. There's a certain cute factor to L, which I think a lot of L fans will point to.
Yeah, he's socially a bit inept.
Yeah.
But quite endearing in that way.
Yeah, he's like a Tumblr poster child kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can see why that character got popular.
He's got a sincerity that is quite nice as well, especially in contrast to Light.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the dynamic of Death Note is, I know it should have been, the dynamic between L and Light, like without like the two of them interacting with each other the way that they do, I think Death Note then becomes a bit of a slog. Well, not a slog. Maybe not like definitely not in the first half, but like definitely in the second half.
Yeah,
when we kind of move away from that dynamic, which we'll get into. I think ultimately it does make it like it's not as entertaining, and it kind of robs that bit of the dual dynamic is what makes it basically. I will agree there.
next character I guess we should talk about is Misa.
Yeah, Misa, yeah. Yeah, so, like, Misa is Light's girlfriend, and I guess a little bit of spoilers now before the main section, but, you know, she is also a owner of the Death Note, of another Death Note, and is possessed by a Shinigami as well. And she has slightly different powers to Light. There's a whole thing where you can trade half your lifespan to get Shinigami eyes, where if you look at someone, you can read what their name is without having to ask a question. So Light completely uses Misa to his own ends. It's a very manipulative relationship because she absolutely adores him. Because fairly quickly it's revealed that, you know, he is Kira to Misa.
Well, Misa, she's actually quite clever in how she puts this together.
Yeah, she is. Yeah. She's a bit. Misa, I think, ends up becoming a bit of a parody of herself, I think, in the end.
Yeah, like a lot of things, this all happens in the second half.
Yeah, I think after her kind of her usefulness in the plot significantly diminishes in the second half of the series, but in the first half, for like this type of character, the ditzy airhead, I think there is something to Misa, and I think each character has. It's something that I like in kind of the final arc before the first half ends, where, you know, every character has a moment to shine, and if you have any doubt that Misa doesn't have something about her, then it's kind of put to rest in the final arc of the first half of the series, which I like and appreciate.
Yeah, she is, you know, is often quite capable in ways you don't expect her to be, because she's so. I don't know, she's so in love with Light, who is objectively terrible and is terrible to her. You know, and she's, like, to be clear, she is a bad person, you know, a serial murderer.
A domestic terrorist.
A domestic terrorist. But I can't help but feel quite sorry for her, because, girl, you could do so much better than Light.
Yeah, she could definitely do better than Light, yeah. I only ever want good things for Misa, and that's kind of how I feel at the end of the series.
Yeah, I mean, she probably does deserve to be in jail, but she deserved better than Light, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Light's horrible, you know. On top of everything else, he's also not a very good boyfriend.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Surprise, yeah.
The Shinigami.
The Shinigami, yeah, so, like, obviously the main Shinigami is Ryuk, who is actually not in it as much as I remember. He's in it quite a bit in the first quarter of the series, and then in the kind of the second half of the first half of the series, he goes away for plot reasons, and in the second half he's basically not in it at all, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Because I think Ryuk's really, really good. He's, you know... I kind of always envision the Shinigami, because there's another one who's Rem, and that's Misa's Shinigami. I kind of view him as kind of being like the Greek chorus of the world of Death Note, like omniscient narrators watching the squabbles of petty mortals, you know, and there's something very theatrical, I think, to the Shinigami, something very kind of Shakespeare, very Greek tragedy to it.
I would also put forward that Rem, Misa's Shinigami, might be one of the most sympathetic characters in Death Note.
Probably, actually, yeah. I was shocked at how much I actually ended up caring about Rem in the series, where Rem has, like, a clear motive.
Yeah, and she's kind of actually quite selfless, you know, for a death god. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose the only other characters left to talk about are Light's dad and the rest of the police force.
Yeah. So, like, one thing that the Death Note has to straddle quite a difficult line on is that a lot of the main cast are police, but depending on your politics, so you might have issues reconciling with that. But I think for the most part, I think they're as fairly neutral on the police as they can. It's more, again, about the struggles of people trying to outwit someone smarter than them, and the kind of the cat and mouse game. And
it is worth noting, I think, as well, that the actual police force as a whole ends up caving to Kira pretty quickly. They are intimidated into backing off from investigating him. And the actual heroes on the show are people who, officers who end up defecting from the police force as a whole to continue risking their lives to catch the murderer.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's fine, I feel. I mean, the side problem with Death Note, well, like, I think it struggles with, like, the rest of the cast.
Yeah, I quite enjoy Matsuda.
Yeah, Matsuda, yeah.
Matsuda. Yeah. I apologise in advance for all of the names throughout this podcast that I will be pronouncing wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think Matsuda's a good character. Again, I think he's got a lot to do more, like, in the second half of the first half of the series.
Yeah. Like the 2/4 mark.
But yeah, about the 2/4 mark, whatever you want to call it. I think Matsuda really starts to come into his own. As for the others, I think they're okay. There's a slightly more serious cop with, like, the afro. Mogi? No? What's he called? But this is my side problem with Death Note, basically, where I think one of the great things about lots of shonen stuff is the cast of characters and, like, the extended cast of characters. Mm-hmm. And I get that Death Note isn't meant to be that sort of manga. It just happens to be published in a magazine known for doing massive ensemble casts. But I feel like there's not enough room for some of those other characters to shine. I think the police force is kind of where it suffers a bit. Light's dad, Chiefigami, I think he's fine. And there's an interesting back and forth because L fairly early on suspects Light of being Kira. And there's an interesting back and forth there of what does the police officer know that's logical and what does the father want. So I think Light's dad's got a good little arc. And the others, they're okay, they're fine. They're there to keep the plot moving and do minutiae and important things in the investigation.
With all that in mind, do you think it's time we start talking spoilers?
Yes, because I think a conversation without going into spoilers in Death Note is very, very difficult.
This is your warning to switch off now if you do not want the show spoiled for you.
Yeah, so, like, if in conclusion, like, Death Note's a good one to introduce someone to if they are kind of completely new to anime or very limited experience of anime, because it's kind of got similar genre trappings to lots of Western stuff, police procedurals, but there's enough kind of anime-ness with the Shinigami and the concept to kind of make it kind of unique, which is why I put it forward as being a good one to watch first. But if you're still around, then we're going to start talking spoilers now, and we're just going to go straight into it. Did you know that L dies? Did you know that L would die halfway through the series?
Sort of. I knew that something big happened between L and Light about halfway through, and I know that it turned a lot of people off the show. I didn't know definitely that it would be L's death, but I could make a good guess that was what it would be. Yeah,
so the anime at a very leisurely pace covers the first 6.5 volumes of the manga up until about episode 27. And then with 10 episodes remaining, they cover the final 5.5 volumes of manga, which is a time skip post L being killed. So the first half of the series is kind of the cat and mouse game between Light and L. Basically, L trying to find out the identity of Kira, suspecting it's Light, and then Light, through a series of circumstances, weasels his way onto the police force and is able to get insider information to basically help him to stay one step ahead of L. And that kind of forms the arc we've been mentioning, where through a series of circumstances, Light is able to basically dispose of himself as being Kira for the moment to try and...
He actually loses him and Misa both actually lose their memories of their crimes, so they are, like, functionally different people for this arc.
Yeah, basically, which explains, like, a bit of, like, a tonal shift.
Yeah.
Because the first quarter of the series is quite dour, it's very serious, it's quite po-faced, where it's the very early days of Light's time as Kira. He's still trying to get a footing on how he's going to try and accomplish this grand task of taking down L. And then obviously with a series of circumstances and the connection to his dad, he's able to get onto the police force. And he's able to start seeing information, staying on top of the game. And yeah, through a series of circumstances, he loses his memories, and he joins L in trying to capture a new Kira who's arisen, which is basically they suspect in who's based like at a corporate headquarters. And a lot of fans point to this arc as kind of being when the rot has started to set in, because there's a distinct tonal shift in the series. It goes from being a bit more po-faced and dour to being a bit funnier. There's more gags in it, and there's more chibi faces and cute, frantic, hysterical anime moments. I actually really like this arc.
I really like this arc. I would say it's probably my favourite of this series.
It's my favourite as well, and I think the tonal shift is justified because Light and Misa are functionally not the same people as the first quarter of the series. I think having them act a little bit more goofy, as if almost like they are like real teenagers, I think it's fine and it's kind of cute. And then the tension then becomes the ticking time bomb. Alfred Hitchcock spoke about tension being created, and he uses the example of the audience seeing a ticking time bomb underneath the table. The ticking time bomb being is, when is Light going to find his Death Note again?
And get his memories back.
His memories back by doing so. And that's the tension. And I think it works great. I think it's got some of the best interactions between L and Light. And the kind of emotional core of the series becomes clear, where L and Light in another reality, they could have been friends. I think the series does a really, really, really good job at establishing that, where they're both intellectually on the same level, and in another reality, L is a reflection of Light. Basically, he is almost like a bit of like an end game of what Light could become. Basically,
of course, then Light gets his memories back and finds a way to finally kill L.
Yeah,
and this for me is when the series kind of takes a nosedive.
Yeah, I think for most people as well. I think everyone agrees that the second half of Death Note is nowhere near as good. I stand by that L should have been the one to take down Light.
Absolutely.
And I will always, always, always stand by that. But by killing off L, the series does a time skip, and it establishes that L is from an orphanage for I don't know,
gifted children.
Yeah, like a Xavier school for gifted mutants. And there's a second generation. There's a bit of a Wuthering Heights theme by invention going on here. There's a new generation. There's a new Kathy. There's a new Heathcliff. Only this time there is M and N, who are kind of like the successors to the name of L. M is more callous. He's more punk. He's way more brazen in his approach, while Nia, aka N, is pretty much just L 2.0, to the point where he might as well just be L.
Yeah,
there's nothing discerning about him.
Yeah, I think L's thing was that he was always snacking on different food throughout the series, and Nia plays with toys and games instead. Yeah.
And has a very, very similar thought pattern to L. Now, Mellow M, I actually like. I think after the cat and mouse games and the intellectual back and forth of just characters thinking, I like the fact that the series shakes things up a little bit by having Mellow be so brazen in his approach. I think instead of having a character talking about it and thinking about it, I kind of like how Mellow just
is different.
Which is definitely explored a lot more in the manga, because, as I said, in the manga, after L dies, there's still 5.5 volumes left, while the anime tries to squeeze 5.5 volumes into 10 episodes, because I think the creators knew that no one really likes the second half of the series as much as the first half.
And just get it over with.
Just get it over with, basically, is pretty much their approach, which comes at a big disservice to someone who is experiencing the story for the first time. So, as a first-time viewer of Death Note, were you confused at any point in the second half of the series? Because I was.
I don't know. I don't know how much I remember confusion so much as, just feeling kind of apathetic towards a lot of what was going on by that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like I've said before, I was watching it just to see Light be taken down.
Yeah, and then when Elle prevents him from doing that, it's just waiting for the inevitable, basically.
Yeah.
And I think the circumstances of how Nia takes down Light, I think, is pretty unsatisfying. And yeah, I just find those final 10 episodes to be big disappointments, where I think even the creators knew that they were just waiting for it to end, just get to the end.
I think for me as well, I have a low tolerance for edgy, grim darkness, and I think in those last 10 episodes moved a bit closer to that than I really like. I think the first, the first part up until Elle dying it's kind of saved by Elle because he really is quite sincere, and you can maybe not relate to him, but you have warm feelings about him, and then he's gone, and it just feels a bit grim after that.
Yeah, it feels a little anticlimactic, I find. Because if you were to do a second half of the series and you do want to kill Elle, then I think the idea of basically having Light take on the mantle of being Elle, so now he's both Elle and Kira, is interesting, but I think timings are just off of the whole thing.
And I think if you were going to do that, then the people who should be, who should get the glory of taking him down are the rest of the cops that he's been working with all this time.
Yeah, if anything, I think even in an alternate version, that might have been more interesting, where the focus shifts to the other cops, and maybe you get to understand their perspective, and they're the ones to take down Light. Because in the end, it's just through Nia just doing Elle things that, they're able to defeat Light in the end, which is a big shame.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Light being defeated, I really enjoyed watching that, to be honest.
Yeah, it is great. Yeah.
It was, for me, it was a near sadistic level of glee when he is exposed as this mass murderer and in front of all his colleagues, and he dies painfully. It's probably not a healthy sort of feeling, but God, it was so cathartic.
It's satisfying, and it's seeing him being brought down, I think is good. But even then, I think the ending of the anime rushes it, because in the manga, there's at least one more chapter post Light being arrested / killed, which focuses on the post Kira world, which you don't get in the anime, which I think is a big shame. So even with the anime, I think they rushed the ending way too much. So yeah, which I guess kind of brings us round to kind of final thoughts on Death Note, where even though it has a fatal problem, a fatal flaw, it's still considered to be an absolute classic and a good one to introduce to people. So despite its flaws, do you still think people should watch it?
I do. I would say that I like it a lot, but I don't love it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel these days as well.
But I really do enjoy a lot of the mind gamey stuff, especially in the first half. I enjoy that kind of thing. I find that fascinating to watch, and how characters can get out of these situations that seem so dire. So yeah, I would recommend it. I think to somebody who hasn't watched a lot of anime, I think it probably is a really good starting point.
Yes. Well, watching characters get out of situations through mind games and stuff is basically just me. The long game of the series is to get Grace to watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where the stand battles basically are just extended puzzles and mind games and stuff. And but we'll get there when we get there. Yeah, so for me, as kind of coming back to it after all this time, it was a bit of a thrill ride in the first half, because it was great seeing lots of arcs and characters and moments which I really like. I get to a point I'd be like, oh my god, this is the episode where Elle and Light play tennis together, or oh yeah, Matsuda does something really cool in this episode. And then the second half, it was just like, waiting for it to end, and then we could move on. But yeah, I would still posit it as being a good one to introduce someone to, especially as like a bit of like a first one. Because as I said before, it's got the familiar genre trappings of Western stuff, but with enough kind of anime-ness to kind of make it feel unique and like a little bit different. That's the thing though, the series that we pick might not always be the best, most shining examples or be completely without flaws, which is definitely going to be the case when we talk about our next episode. But they're still important, and Death Note captured a cultural zeitgeist when, I think for a lot of fans of the genre, where it was about a moment of manga and anime can be so much more than just dudes beating the crap out of each other. Because, again, the distinction is that anime and manga are not a genre, it's a medium with lots of avenues and lots of different things within it. It's more than just the shonen stuff. And I think for that reason, it definitely is a good one to show people, because it is so much more than just, I think, what people's perception of anime is. So, at the end of each episode, we'll be providing our personal rankings of the shows that we've watched. As this is the first episode, Death Note is both my favourite thing and my least favourite thing that we've watched. Do you have any conjecture to that, Grace?
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So at the moment, on both our lists, Death Note stands at number 1, but I also put it in last place as well, as we kind of build up the list over the weeks. Totally not stolen, for some of my shout out, totally not stolen from my man, Tim Rogers, my video game analysis man, who at the end of each episode ranks the video games that he's played for that episode. So I'm stealing that idea to kind of get our list. I suspect Death Note will probably end up being like low on the list.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so after this Death Note,
we next time in 2 weeks' time from now, we'll be back here and we're going to be talking about Full Metal Alchemist 2003.
Yes, because I have very controversial opinions about Full Metal Alchemist, which I can't wait to get into when we talk about Full Metal Alchemist in the next episode. And then the following episode, we'll be talking about Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is the follow-up series. So you've got 2 episodes of Full Metal Alchemist to look forward to, aren't we?
I'm very excited.
Yeah, when me and Guess both gush over how good Full Metal Alchemist is for what could be a very long episode. But if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to rate us, follow us on
subscribe. Is that a thing?
Subscribe, yeah. I will have a Twitter account, I guess, at some point, so you can keep up to date with all the latest episodes. We'll probably announce what the handle will be in the next episode. And keep an eye out for more episodes of Where There's a Weeb, There's a Way. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Or should I say, sayonara.